The laughter cut through me like a dull knife, slow and jagged, as I stood there in the bustling kitchen of La Bella Cucina, my white chef's coat smeared with flour and sauce. "Look at him, playing the hero again," sneered Marco, the sous chef, his voice dripping with disdain as he nodded toward the back alley where I'd just handed a steaming plate of pasta to the old homeless man who'd been lingering there for days. The others joined in, their chuckles echoing off the stainless steel counters. Elena, the line cook, rolling her eyes and muttering about how I was wasting good food on those people, and even Mr. Rossi, the owner, shaking his head with a pitying smile that felt more like a slap. They didn't say it outright, but I knew what lurked beneath. I was the Muslim chef, the one who prayed in the storage room during breaks, the outsider who dared to show kindness in a world that saw my faith as a threat. Why bother helping some ragged stranger when I could barely help myself in this place? My heart pounded with a mix of anger and hurt, wondering if they'd ever see beyond their judgments. But deep down, I clung to the belief that goodness would prevail. What I didn't know then was that the old man outside held a secret that would shatter their mockery forever. My name is Ahmed Khalil, and I've always believed that a single act of compassion can ripple through the world like a stone in a pond. I grew up in a small town just outside Detroit, where my parents emigrated from Lebanon in the 90s, chasing the American dream with nothing but a suitcase of recipes and unyielding faith. Dad ran a modest halal grocery, and Mom taught me to cook, her hands guiding mine as we kneaded dough for manakish, whispering verses from the Quran about mercy and patience. Allah sees everything, Ahmed. Be kind even when the world isn't, she'd say. I carried that with me when I moved to New York City 5 years ago, landing a job at La Bella Cucina, an upscale Italian restaurant in Manhattan. It wasn't easy. The kitchen was a pressure cooker of egos and deadlines, and from day one, I felt the stares. My beard, my name, the way I excused myself for salat, they marked me as different. Marco, with his tattooed arms and quick temper, would joke about checking my bags for bombs when I brought lunch from home. Elena, sharp-tongued and ambitious, avoided partnering with me on shifts, claiming my cultural stuff slowed her down. And Mr. Rossi, he hired me for my skills. I could whip up a risotto that made critics swoon, but he treated me like a token, parading my exotic background to impress diverse clients, while ignoring the subtle digs from the staff. That fateful week started like any other, the restaurant humming with the clatter of pots and the sizzle of garlic and olive oil. It was mid-November, the air outside crisp and biting, leaves swirling in the wind like forgotten prayers. I had noticed the old man a few days earlier, huddled in the alley behind the dumpster, his coat threadbare and his face etched with lines that spoke of a hard life. He never begged, just sat there with a quiet dignity, his eyes distant, as if lost in memories. Something about him tugged at me. Maybe it was the way he reminded me of my grandfather, who had endured wars and displacement back home. One evening, after a grueling dinner rush, I couldn't ignore him anymore. I plated some leftover carbonara, added a side of bread, and slipped out the back door. "Here, sir," I said softly, kneeling to his level. "It's warm. Please, eat." He looked up, his blue eyes piercing through the grime, and nodded gratefully. "Bless you, son," he murmured, his voice raspy but kind. Word spread fast in the kitchen. The next day, as I prepped for lunch service, Marco cornered me by the walk-in fridge. "What's with the charity case, Ahmed? You think feeding strays makes you some kind of saint?" His words stung, but I forced a smile. "It's just food, Marco. No one should go hungry." Elena chimed in from across the room, chopping onions with unnecessary vigor. "Yeah, well, maybe if you focused more on work instead of your whatever, we'd hit our times better." I felt my cheeks burn, the familiar knot of frustration tightening in my chest. Why did my kindness always circle back to my faith? In their eyes, it wasn't just about helping, it was about me being too Muslim, too other. That night I prayed longer than usual. asking for strength to rise above it. Little did I know, the old man, whose name I later learned was Harold, would become the catalyst for everything. As the days wore on, the mockery escalated. I'd sneak out scraps whenever I could. A bowl of minestrone, some garlic knots, even a slice of tiramisu on a particularly cold night. Each time, Harold accepted with quiet thanks, sharing snippets of his life, a veteran of some forgotten war, widowed young, fallen on hard times after a factory closed. His stories were laced with wisdom, quotes from books I'd never read, and a humility that humbled me. But back inside, the kitchen turned hostile. Marco started accidentally bumping into me during rushes, spilling ingredients and blaming my distractions. Elena whispered to the waitstaff, and soon even they gave me sidelong glances. One afternoon, Mr. Rossi pulled me aside. "Ahmed, I appreciate your heart, but this isn't a soup kitchen. Customers first, okay?" His tone was paternal, but it felt condescending, like he expected me to cause trouble just by being me. The tension built like a storm cloud. At home in my cramped apartment in Queens, I'd confide in my sister Layla over video calls. "I'm judging me without knowing me," I'd say, my voice cracking. She, a teacher back in Michigan, would remind me of our parents' teachings. Sabr, Ahmed, patience. Show them through actions, not words. But doubt crept in. Was I foolish for helping Harold? Should I stop to fit in? My faith anchored me. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us to feed the needy, to be merciful. Yet every mocking laugh chipped away at my resolve. One evening, after a brutal shift where Marco openly ridiculed me in front of the whole team, "Ahmed's got a new boyfriend out back," I nearly broke. Tears welled as I stepped into the alley, plate in hand. Harold noticed. "Rough day?" he asked gently. I nodded, sitting beside him on the cold pavement. "They don't understand," I whispered. He patted my shoulder. "People fear what they don't know, son, but truth has a way of shining through." The turning point came on a Friday, my day off, but I'd come in early to prep for a big catering event. The kitchen was abuzz, everyone focused on the order for a high-profile gala at the Metropolitan Museum. As I diced vegetables, the back door creaked open. In walked Harold, but not the ragged man I knew. He was cleaned up, wearing a crisp suit that looked tailor-made, his hair combed, beard trimmed. The staff froze. "Can we help you?" Mr. Rossi asked, stepping forward with his best customer smile. Harold's eyes scanned the room, landing on me with a warm grin. "Actually, I'm here for Ahmed." Confusion rippled through the kitchen. Marco snorted. "Him? What, you his uncle or something?" Harold ignored him, turning to Mr. Rossi. "I'm Harold Whitaker. You might know me as the founder of Whitaker Investments." Gasps echoed. Whitaker was a legend, a billionaire philanthropist who'd vanished from public life years ago after a personal tragedy, rumored to be living reclusively. But here he was, in our alley fed. "Ahmed's kindness saved me," Harold continued, his voice steady. "I was testing the waters, seeing if humanity still existed in this city, posing as homeless to find genuine souls, and he, without hesitation, fed me, listened to me, treated me like a human when others walked by." The room fell silent. Mr. Rossi's face paled. "Mr. Whitaker, we had no idea." Harold waved him off. "Of course not. But Ahmed did it without knowing who I was. That's true character." He turned to me, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "Son, I'm investing in your dream. A restaurant of your own, halal fusion, whatever you envision. And," he added, glancing at the staff, "I'll be recommending La Bella Cucina highly, provided they value their talent properly." Marco stammered an apology, Elena looked away in shame, and Mr. Rossi promised changes. But for me, it wasn't about the money or the vindication.
It was the look in their eyes, the realization that their judgments were baseless. I stood taller, my faith reaffirmed. As Harold and I stepped out together, planning the future, I whispered a quiet thanks to Allah. Kindness had prevailed, and in that moment I proved them all wrong, not with anger, but with the quiet strength of my heart. In the weeks that followed, the kitchen transformed. Marco approached me one day, hesitant. "Ahmed, I was wrong. Teach me about your culture." We shared stories over coffee, bridging gaps I'd thought impossible. Elena invited me to her family's dinner, curious about my recipes. Mr. Rossi implemented diversity training, and the restaurant thrived with new fusion dishes I created. My new venture, Khalil's Kitchen, opened in Brooklyn 6 months later, a place where everyone was welcome, regardless of background. Harold became a mentor, his test turning into a lifelong friendship. Looking back, that painful laughter in the kitchen was the forge that tempered my spirit. I learned that discrimination thrives in ignorance, but kindness illuminates the truth. And in a world quick to judge, being true to oneself is the greatest victory.